Monday mornings were usually the most dreaded day for Uru. She reached into her wallet and counted four pieces of 1,000 naira notes, which she hurriedly handed over to the taxi driver. She made her way out of the car and started walking fast almost immediately. At the same time, she was struggling to close her wallet. Unsuccessful at that, she dropped it into her handbag and made her way to the entrance of the bank. She walked past a young man who she barely greeted. Uru barely made her way into the banking hall when she bumped into Dayo, her colleague. Is Mr. Bami here yet? She asked. Yeah, replied Dayo. He came in 5 minutes ago and he has already asked for you twice. What? Exclaimed Uru. What is wrong with that man? It's not even 7 o'clock yet. Sometimes I feel he's doing this on purpose, just to find a way to give me a memo or even fire me. What do you expect? Replied Dayo. You have turned him down twice now, and you know he's not pleased with that. Just then, Uru's name came ringing through the banking hall. Mr. Bami was asking for her again. It was 8 a.m., and customers have started walking into the bank for business. Uru was at her desk, already waiting to attend to her customers. Few minutes later, she was looking into the smiling face of a very handsome young man who was greeting her. Good morning. She stuttered a greeting in reply. How may I help you? She asked. The young man handed her a wallet. Uru stared at him. How did you get that? She asked. Fumbling for her bag, she reached inside, only to discover that her wallet wasn't inside. You dropped it on your way into the bank. I tried to call you, but it seemed like you were in a hurry, he replied. Embarrassed, Uru took the wallet from the man and thanked him. My pleasure, he said, smiling at her. She awkwardly smiled back, shy at the same time. Minutes later, the young man left the bank premises after being attended to. It was 5 months later, after the incident with the wallet. Uru had developed a strong liking for Uzo. Uzo was a young businessman who deals on importation and sales of building material. He was from Abakaliki in Ebonyi State, and he was the only child of his late parents, he had told Uru. She felt blessed to have met him. Being the first child of her parents, she had to support her family financially because both her parents were struggling and barely making ends meet with their petty business. Her parents had struggled financially to send her to the university, borrowing money from people most of the time. It was such a relief when Uru graduated from the university and landed that job in one of the best banks in Nigeria. Because of the financial burden, Uru couldn't even rent an apartment of her own, so she still lived with her parents and six siblings, just to save costs. Uru and Uzo's connection had blossomed quickly, fueled by shared dreams and late night conversations on the phone. Almost every evening, sometimes late at night, Uzo would drive Uru home from the office. He showered her and her family with gifts regularly. By the 6th month, Uzo had taken a few of his king's men and had gone to ask for Uru's hand in marriage after her parents had told him that they didn't want to see their daughter hanging out with a man except he married her first. Uru's parents were strict Christians, and Uru and her siblings had been raised under very strict rules. Not long after Uru's bride price was paid and her Ibanko wine carrying was done, she moved in with Uzo, her husband, into a new lavish house that Uzo had built shortly after meeting her. Months passed, and what seemed like a blissful marriage became not so blissful. Uzo became withdrawn. A few times, Uru had caught him, usually at one corner of the house, speaking quietly into the phone. He always seemed to be battling with his thoughts. He became very irritable and would sometimes yell at her over flimsy issues. Whenever Uru tried to find out what was going on with her husband, he would explain that business wasn't moving like it should. A couple of times, he had asked Uru if it was possible to borrow some money from her bank. When Uru asked how much, he mentioned a ridiculous sum running into millions, which their new house couldn't even cover as collateral. A few months later, Uzo and Uru received an uninvited guest, one whose visit would change the course of their marriage and relationship forever. Her name was Ada. She was a medical doctor and the elder and only sibling of Uzo. She had been living in the US for a very long time. As it would turn out, Uzo was a dropout who had misused the money that had been given to him on several occasions to start up a business for himself. Apparently, the money he squandered on Uru and her family, their wedding, the house, and the lavish cars was all the money meant for use in building Ada's house. Ada ordered Uzo to move back into the family house. She seized the key of the house and the documents. Uru was so heartbroken. Uzo had lied about everything. How can such a loving, gentle, generous man turn out to be a callous, careless, selfish liar? She felt betrayed. She refused to move into the family house with Uzo. In bitter tears, she packed her things and returned to her parents' house. Her parents, on learning the truth, were so disappointed and heartbroken. They felt responsible for what had happened to their daughter. They did not do a proper check to find out who Uzo was before giving out their daughter in marriage. They begged Uru for forgiveness. After a few months, both families decided it was best to annul the marriage. Thankfully, there were no kids involved. A few months later, after the marriage was annulled, Uru was transferred to another branch in Ibadan. She gladly accepted, ready to move on to the next chapter of her life. Her relationship with Uzo had lasted only 2 years. Life had dealt her a blow, but she was grateful for the experience. Important lessons had been learnt, and better choices would be made henceforth.